The clock strikes 8, and all the guests have congregated in the manor's parlor, chatting and mingling in the warm light of the roaring fire. The rain beats more promptly on the window frames as the clock chimes the hour. Quiet jazz music floats from a brass gramophone in the corner of the room.
Colonel Mustard, how delightful it is to see you.
Good evening, Miss Peacock. Only moments ago we seemed to be traveling on a train together, and yet here you are, still beautiful as ever.
Don't be silly, Colonel. Train rides are rather dirty. I had to change into a formal dress before arriving.
Indeed you have, still in that gorgeous royal blue color.
Oh, stop. You don't have the right to make a woman like me blush.
Oh, forgive me, Professor. Mrs. Peacock, may I introduce you to Professor Plum? He is the head teacher and leading excavator at the local university here.
How do you do?
Instead of shaking his hand, Mrs. Peacock glances towards him, gray eyes scanning his suit and figure.
Excavation? What type of digs are you a part of, Professor?
Well, I pride myself in discovering and unearthing most of the artifacts of the lost city of Mesopotamia. It's a dig mostly based in Iraq, so I spent most of my time in the desert rather than my classrooms. I was just discussing with Colonel Mustard. I was there for a brief time during the war, and we were discussing the squadron that I...
Can't stand the sun. If I was ever in the heat for too long, I would faint, or worse, break out in hives.
Oh, well, yes, I suppose so.
It's actually quite remarkable. The men who came back said you could see the mirages as the heat left the sand. And when night fell, they said the stars stretched out for miles.
How interesting. We must chat about it over dinner sometime, Colonel.
Sitting on a cushioned oak divan sits Scarlet and Mr. Green. Scarlet twirls her hair and lets out a long sigh.
If you don't mind me asking, what made you so cross with Mr. Boddy a few minutes ago, Mr. Green?
Nothing of your concern, Miss Scarlet. What goes on between me and Mr. Boddy is something I'm not allowed to converse with other people about.
What are you, a priest? Finance is not something to be extremely... Well, it's not something extremely interesting, nor should it be a withstanding secret.
Mr. Boddy deserves some kind of privacy. It's common decency not to blab about a man's expenses and bills, especially if you're the man's accountant.
I didn't say that I was questioning your morals as a gentleman. I was wondering where your stance was with Mr. Boddy on a personal level.
What is there to say? The man is wrapped up in income rather than outcome. I have to deal with most of the income anyway, which both strains and pressures the relationship between us. All I can say is that we have started off on the wrong foot since day one. What about you, Miss Scarlet?
Me? With Mr. Boddy?
You didn't think I would ask questions when I turned around to see my employer embracing the woman who had just entered with me. It's okay. You don't have to explain yourself. If I was in his position, I would have stayed until the dawn.
The sweet jazz music squeaks to silence as the recorder is lifted. An older servant, in white attire, stands with beads of sweat on her forehead and a sweet yet oddly strained expression on her face.
Pardon the interruption, but dinner is served.